So I want to introduce our speaker today. Jennifer Lemmer Posey is the Tibbles Curator of Circus at the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art in Sarasota, Florida. She joined the staff of the Ringling Museum in 2002 as collections manager, and today is responsible for curating permanent galleries and rotating exhibits, highlighting the diverse objects that represent the history and cultural impact of the circus arts. Jennifer has contributed to many publications, including The American Circus, Early Popular Visual Culture, and the international magazine Planet Circus. From 2013 to 2017, she served as editor for Bandwagon, the Journal of the Circus Historical Society, and in 2017 served as an advisory scholar for the 2017 Smithsonian Folklife Festival, celebrating the circus arts. So Jennifer, I'm going to pass the mic over to you and the screen.
Great. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you so much for the introduction, and to all of you for joining this morning. I always kind of laugh when I hear my own background. Who would have thought 20 years ago when I joined the staff of the Ringling that I would edit a circus journal or advise the Smithsonian on circus arts. It's been a really wonderful career that I'm still well in the middle of. I love the work that I do here. I love museum work, but working with the circus collections is very special. So I'm happy to be here with you all today. I'm looking forward to the point that we can all kind of open up and chat, but to inspire some of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I've been approaching my work in these last few years. I think we all have seen such changes with the pandemic, and we all are navigating that in our own ways. But one of the things that I've been really mindful of is how much I miss working with a robust community of people in and out of my office, because obviously we don't see as much of one another face to face. And so what I'm going to talk through today are some of the really interesting and inspiring collaborative projects that I've been working on that have kind of kept me going in these last couple of years. I thought I would start out, just in case anyone hasn't had an opportunity to visit the Ringling. It is a really special place. Again, I feel very fortunate to be here. The Ringling was founded by John Ringling and his wife, Mabel. John was the youngest of the brothers who founded the circus. And he settled here in Sarasota, made a winter home here at Catazan, which is in the center of this, and decided that he wanted to leave a legacy beyond entertainment. And to that end, he began collecting artwork and founded the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art, which first opened in 1930 for a day. The collection is one of the finest collections of Baroque artwork in the United States. It's extraordinary. The grounds are 66 acres on Sarasota Bay. They are also extraordinary. We've had visionary directors along the way, like Chick Austin, our first official director, who founded the Circus Museum. He understood that there was more to the story than you might see. And so what we do here in all ways is seek to honor that legacy of John and Mabel Ringling and the circus and the beauty of the Sarasota community. We have literally something for everyone here. So it's a wonderful diverse group of visitors that we see as well. A lot of international visitors come in, but we are the state art museum. So we also are trying to do better in outreach and in making the collections accessible and of meaning to more of the state and the Southeast region. My work is specifically with the Circus Museum. So the Circus Museum was first opened in 1948 under the leadership of Chick Austin, and it was named the Museum of the American Circus when it opened. But oddly enough, Chick Austin immediately began collecting European prints, costumes from around the world, other decorative art objects that related to the circus in a global sense. And then it opened up to the local circus community here in Sarasota, who had come here because John Ringling had also moved their winter quarters here to Sarasota during his lifetime. And that's where we started to collect wagons. In the background of this image, you can see there's a white ticket wagon that was built in 1912 for the Ringling Brothers Circus and was restored here at the museum many years ago by volunteers. But it's a beautiful example of this traveling world that magically transformed cities around the country as they moved under canvas up until the 1950s. The Circus Museum has has gone through many different iterations, and we now have over 47,000 square feet of gallery space that's dedicated to the circus, which we need because we have large wagons and a railroad car, as well as banners and other, sizable materials. And we also have a wonderful array of interesting small objects that we work with that have been collected over the years. So in this image, there's over to the left, there is a lantern that was used to light the way to the circus lot. There are all these small pieces that tell different parts of the circus story. So I have a vast collection to work with, and it requires me to think about things from a lot of different angles. My training is in art history, so I'm really drawn to a lot of formal aspects of objects. But I also think that understanding their meaning within a community is critical, and especially to the work that I do with the circus collections. So collaboration is really the way that I see that I can do my job better, that I can listen and learn and think about how other people will experience these objects and stories that I'm so close to. My first point of collaboration, as with all museum professionals, is with my colleagues. And I couldn't resist this image when we were installing those cases that you saw in the front. I had the wonderful assistance from our prep and registration and conservation team. Again, because of the Ringling size, we have a wonderful staff with a lot of skills in-house. But these are the same individuals that install the deck art objects in the art museum and in the Katazan. And here they are helping me install a clown marionette that was made in the 1960s by the same puppeteer who did The Sound of Music. And the clown itself represents a historic clown who was part of this community. But I love the care that our colleagues bring. The work we do is about preserving these objects and making sure that they're here for the future, but also making sure that they're presented in a way that makes them approachable and meaningful. And everyone in this image had some part in determining how that clown was going to be best cared for, best presented in this moment in the case. And I think, as you can see, everybody enjoyed being part of that process. So I mentioned I have a lot of large objects in the collection. One of the most special pieces I think we have is this mural, The Greatest Show on Earth, which was painted by the artist William Woodward in 1990, was when he completed it, for the corporate offices of Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, which at the time were in Virginia. And this mural was donated when they moved their offices, and it's become a really landmark piece for us. It's in the entryway to the Tibbles Learning Center, which is the first building of our circus museums. It is over 60 feet in length, and it features the stars of the circus from the 1980s and early 1990s. For me personally, it is exactly an example of collaboration, because what is represented in the mural are the people of the circus. And many of these people are friends, are collaborators in their own right. When we opened the mural back, oh my gosh, was that in 2010? We actually had as many of the individuals who were portrayed in the mural who could make it to our campus stand in front and be represented. So in the lower portion of this image, you can see a woman in a dark suit with her hands behind her back. That's Dolly Jacobs. She is an aerial artist. She is depicted in the top corner of the mural with her arm down. She's performing on the Roman rings. Beside her is Karen Bell, who is a clown and who is depicted just above her own head as 5 figures. She had a bunch of puppets. And all this is to say that these people keep me honest, and everything I do, I have to think about how I'm representing their community and what that means to them. They also are tremendous resources to me. I try always with any project that I undertake to go to members of the circus community to get that kind of feedback. That's a very privileged position, again, that I work with a living community that is here and that I can turn to, and who are always wonderfully supportive and happy to partake in really telling this history that they're a part of. My latest project, which is actually what's in process right now in the room right beside me, is a new gallery installation where we've worked with members of the circus community to look at the last 50 years of Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, which is an era very different than the tented show. This era, they're moving by trucks, they're going into buildings and using a lot of technology. And so we've used the feedback from the community to understand how the spectacle of the circus was brought to life in buildings, and we're using that to inform these gallery spaces. This particular part of the new installation has interactives there in the center cases where our visitors will be able to gesture and have an interface open up where they can explore circus acts from the 50 years of the Feld stewardship of Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. So all of these kinds of moments, I feel, are a collaborative effort with the community that I represent here in the galleries and whose stories that I share. But I also am looking for other ways to reach out. And here at the museum, because we have such diverse collections within our art museum, I've found a lot of opportunities with my own colleagues internally. Our Asian art collection, Dr. Rhiannon Paget, has been actively collecting extraordinary woodblock prints that depict the circus in Japan. What's really interesting historically is that at this era, Japan had been closed to the West for a very long time. And when it started to reopen in the 1850s, circuses from the West, mostly European shows, were among the very first Westerners to make their way into Japan. And their influence is seen in these prints. So Rhiannon has been actively adding to our collection, looking for the finest examples of circus in Japanese woodblock printing. And at the same time, my colleague Ola Vlusek, who is our curator of modern and contemporary art, has been adding, as appropriate, works of mid-century artists who were inspired by the circus. So just this year, she added, I believe it was 5 lithographic prints from the artist Robert Riggs, who had spent time with Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey when they were in New York, and he would go out to the show and draw from it. And so this wonderful print, which Ola was interested in from the artistic formal side of the use of light and tone, composition, I looked at it and said, well, that's the Walter Juice Troupe. And they were a bar act and an aerial act where they swung and did this kind of comic as though they were going to fall, but then would catch themselves. So we're able to add additional meaning to the experience of these kinds of work because we bring different types of expertise to them. Also recently, my colleague Christopher Jones added this piece by an artist named Rona Bittner. She is a contemporary photographer, and she had undertaken an effort to document clowns. She was interested in what kind of emotions were portrayed or were hidden under the makeup of a clown. And she very kindly offered this print, which is life-size, so it's really extraordinary. She offered it to our photographic collection. And when Chris brought it to me, I said, well, that's Pat Cashin, who is a well-known clown. He unfortunately passed away just a couple of years ago, but again, a part of the circus community. So there's a lot of rich back and forth in the work that we do internally here to understand circus and to situate it within culture, because seeing how it impacted various visual artists is an opportunity for us to think more broadly about how important the circus has been to American culture. On the flip side, I have found that the circus is filled with a lot of really difficult topics to explore, and ones which in this era feel more and more important to be open and engaged with. So, many people are fascinated by the sideshow aspect of circus and what that means for people with various anomalous bodies. And that has been a topic that the Ringling up until the last few years really actively avoided, because what we felt was that there were enough rich stories that had a more positive tilt. So we institutionally tended to shy away from these more controversial subjects, like the display of humans for physical difference or performing animals. And I am trying actively to engage in those topics because I think that they're good places to explore, what it means to be human, what we as a society can be doing better. Can we learn from the past? But obviously these are are very loaded topics to approach. And so one of my dearest collaborative efforts at the moment is working with a professor from New College, which happens to be right beside our campus here. Dr. Miriam Wallace is a professor of literature and the head of the humanities division. And she, on a whim, approached me about doing some research into various anomalous bodies of the 18th century within our collection. And she came and spent some time in the archives before the pandemic and found prints that she was interested in, and it led to conversations about the work she was doing and an introduction to a professor from the University of Winchester, Professor Chris Munsey, who founded a conference that is called Variabilities. And this is now in its, I believe, 6th iteration. So it was decided that maybe the Ringling Museum would be a great place to host this conference. We'd originally hoped to host it in 2020, which obviously did not happen. And then with 2021 being a difficult year, we opted to do it as a virtual conference. But what it was an opportunity for scholars, academic scholars from the disabilities studies communities to come together and present their own work, but at the same time to kind of walk through some of the museum's collections with me, virtually in this sense, to think about how do we talk about people who are different than us. And the philosophical grounding of the variabilities group is that every single body is a variable body, that every one of us has different sets of abilities. And if we stop focusing on an average, wherein we are excluding people like Matthew Buchinger, the center print, who was born without his legs and with not fully formed hands, and yet was able to actually draw the image that you see of him. It was a self-portrait. Anyway, to stop thinking about what the difference means and look at the abilities of any unique individual body. This was kind of a great eye-opening experience for me in terms of dealing with our collections, because it gives me a better way to start using language to talk about these individual figures who are represented in, we have a collection of about 800 historic prints, many of which deal with anomalous bodies. But also to start thinking about it as a spectrum experience. So we have the engraving of Joseph Clericus, the posture maker. And in essence, he was a contortionist. And so when I start thinking about these things, I can now look at a spectrum that circus bodies are all variable, because you have people with extraordinary strength, people with extraordinary flexibility. And sometimes some of those variable aspects may be the result of what we would call a disability. Other times they're things that are lauded as skills or a positive. But if we start thinking about it broadly, then there's a spectrum to include everyone. So to that end, I've been working with some of our Florida State University students in museum studies to do small exhibitions of these prints and to bring the individual stories of the people that are depicted into focus, to understand the people that they were and their experience, and to hopefully start to bring a spectrum of human existence to that conversation. The revelation of that, the idea that I could look at all of the circus bodies as anomalous, it kind of came into focus for me with this particular poster. The posters were where I started learning circus many years ago, and they're still very dear to me. And I go back to them frequently to kind of rethink how the circus was portraying itself. So this poster from 1894, you get a sense of just the range of talents and spectacles that the Barnum and Bailey Circus was presenting in the era. And again, a range of the abilities of the human body. Right in the center is one of our contortionists, and then the aerialist flying, balance, equilibrist acts, and animal acts. It's the full range of humanity played out there in the circus. However, one of my other collaborations made me see this poster in a completely different way. And begin to think about what is an ecosystem, what does the circus as a variety of experiences allow one to think about. And so I think my most eccentric collaboration to date has been one with a former colleague, Dr. David Barry, who is now the Vice President of Visitor Engagement and the Chief Museum Curator for Marie Selby Botanical Gardens. And David approached me saying, we'd like to do a exhibition of circus posters and see how we could relate those to orchids for our fall orchid show. And so we brainstormed on this, first looking for images of orchids in posters which just don't exist. And then thinking a little more abstractly about what are some of the ways we could align things. So orchids are epiphytic plants. They are inherently the aerialists of the botanical world. So we started from that premise, and he took that to his colleagues in the conservatory, who installed beautiful displays of orchids. It's a little hard to make out with the richness of these materials, but in the upper sides, the blooming yellow orchids are all mounted on trapeze bars. And down at the bottom around the ring, the bromeliads have been set up as though they're an audience looking up to appreciate this performance. It's a kind of out of the box way to make an association. It's been a very good collaboration for us, however, because the circus roots of Sarasota are kind of paralleling the roots of the botanical gardens and its development. They're both really intrinsically part of the identity of this area. So to bring them together in this way has been a lot of fun. It also has been a chance for me once again to reflect a little bit more formally on the circus arts. So these images are some that David identified for use at Selby Gardens, and they were put in conversation with images of some of the orchids. So to think formally about the strength and form of a body hanging in space with the iron jaw performer that you see, and then align that with the Gongora unicolor to see this, to appreciate the strength, beauty, and perseverance that it takes to be an orchid or an aerialist. I also really appreciated the comparison of the aerial ladder act with this efflorescence of the Epidendrum galeotinum. I am not the orchid specialist here, but again, opening these doors and looking at something from outside of one's specialty, it has been a way for me to re-engage with the collections that I'm taking care of, that I'm stewarding and sharing with the world, and to try to find perspectives that might be meaningful to our visitors, or it might help them think of things in different ways. Many people come with a lot of perceptions about what the circus is. Sometimes those are very positive and sometimes they're not. But if we can bring that subject to them in these various ways by looking at them from a different lens, then maybe we can help shape their experience and their thoughts going forward. It's something, I'm applying to the circus, but I see it as important for all museum work to step outside of our boxes and look for ways to grow those collaborative efforts. So I